Cybersecurity threats are on the rise, all while cybersecurity teams are facing a shortage of skilled professionals. Now, more than ever, security teams need tools to quickly and effectively identify and resolve cyber threats. Google has always set out to tackle big problems, and in August of 2021, Google announced a $10 billion investment over the next 5 years to strengthen cybersecurity. As part of this investment, Google Cloud recently acquired Mandiant, a world-class cybersecurity company known for its threat intelligence, cyber defense, and incident response services. It also recently unveiled Chronicle Security Operations, a suite that enables organizations to detect, investigate, and respond to threats with the speed, scale, and intelligence of Google. Google is progressing towards their goal of reinventing security to meet the requirements of the rapidly changing world. And here to talk us through it is Sunil Potti, General Manager and Vice President of Cloud Security at Google Cloud, and Cristina Pitarch, Director of EMEA Cloud Security Sales at Google Cloud. Sunil, could you please underline the primary factors driving the increased cybersecurity threat that organizations are now facing?
Yeah, so it's interesting, Alex. Like normally, cyber has always been top of mind for organizations of all sizes, especially the larger enterprises. But in the last 12 to 18 months, there's been unprecedented increase of not just ransomware, but a whole series of, threat actions that don't just affect the elite enterprises, but also the small and medium enterprises. And it's from a Google lens, it's caused by a few factors. The biggest thing that we talk about is called the nation-state pivot. So what is a nation-state pivot? So essentially in the world of cybersecurity, there's, as most of us know, there's like two types of actors or threat types. One is around financial crimes or e-crimes, and they tend to attack all levels of customers, whether it's a very large bank to a small credit union or any of those shops. But on the other hand, we also have these nation-state attackers. And these are actors from these nation states that are targeting normally public sector companies and infrastructure supporting public sector, like large oil and gas in a certain country and so forth. In the last decade or so, though, while those used to be two separate vectors of attacks, in the last year or two, what has happened is that the nation-state actors have started pivoting away from just the governments to the mainstream enterprises for even the most mundane reasons like financial motivation. And when they do that, suddenly every enterprise that was trying to protect itself against what I call transactional threat actors like financial e-crimes, ransomware attacks, and so forth, which would go away after 3 to 4 weeks, are now being hit by seasoned, deep teams. Their whole business and their mission was around cyber warfare, now translated to the mainstream enterprise. And so from the lens that we sit, we think that, look, because of that inflection point, incremental efforts by enterprises to protect themselves no longer will work. They need to hit the reset button to take a step function change on changing how they're approaching the world of cyber against these nation states.
Rather than having security guards outside the front of your building, you now need this kind of security guard equivalent in the whole virtual realm, right? To protect all your assets as a business.
Yeah, and also I think to some extent, the analogy is, in addition to just people, you now need, just like in the extent of the analogy, you need your systems to be highly automated, engineered, so that we could be not just playing defense, but be proactive to even sense threat actors coming in and give you the right signals, because today there's a lot of systems and technology that are also what I would call false positives. So it's like your alarms being tripped up every time a cat goes through the system, versus if it's smart enough to understand who's actually a true burglar or a true threat actor, is also part of the evolution of the technology for these companies to protect themselves against nation states.
Okay, Cristina, well, what are the main challenges that organizations face with this increased threat of cybersecurity?
Well, I think I can talk about many challenges, but if I would think about the 4 main ones that we are seeing right now, I will resume on 4 that are extremely interrelated with each other. One, and the main one probably, is the lack of talent. and the difficulty we find or organizations find in recruiting talent that actually knows about security. And once that you recruit them, to actually keep them, because usually they're very specialized people that have offers for many different companies. So it's very difficult to have the right talent and to keep that right talent on your company. That goes associated with the amount of threats and the increase of threats that we're seeing lately and the speed of them. So there's more sophistication, there's more speed, and there's a lot more threats, which relates to the lack of talent. So again, the people need to work like 10 times more to analyze and to have the same results. And that goes to the third one, which is the noise that this creates. And there's a correlation between the amount of threats that comes in and how many of them are noise and how many of them, like a single person, can actually work through. And then if you add, and mainly on EMEA or the countries that we're right now, legislation, compliance, regulation, to the formula, we become now like a whole balloon on different situations that need to be solved in a different way that we're doing right now. So it's not that easy to have an organization. We are keep on moving about transformation and automatization of security, but if you think on the reality of it and the lower security level, it's not that easy to get to that point. And you need a very conscious strategy that takes from 3 to 5 years to actually think and engineering. So we come and we need to transform between just like fighting risk to actually have a security engineer transformation strategy that will help dealing with the challenges that we're seeing right now.
Sunil, Google recently unveiled Chronicle Security Operations. Take us behind the scenes with the research and development. What makes this a unique solution?
I think if you look back to what Cristina was talking about as to the big challenges that enterprises are facing, in general, I would say that, look, especially with the nation-state pivot coming in and with deep seasoned teams, it's even more important for customers to really ensure that they can start with sensing what's actually happening first. Because if you can't sense, you can't act and prevent anything. And in the old world, you had limited capacity to sense events. Oh, there is intrusions in your network, there's intrusions over online phishing, your credentials have been staffed and all that. And all those are events that need to be captured. And second, they need to be stored for a long period of time because most of these attackers are in the network for a long time. So if you can't store them for more than a year or 2 or so forth, then you're not able to detect their presence, right? So one, you have to be able to essentially detect everything, store them for an indefinite period of time, but at the right time, if you want to access it so that an analyst can detect that, hey, something's going wrong, I need to be able to search it like Google search. And so we fundamentally think about security as a data problem and a data access problem. And Google being really good at accessing information, storing information, indexing it, and all, we applied all of that, groundbreaking technologies to the world of security. And that's really what Chronicle Security Operations is the ability to democratize to all of our enterprises the ability to store all your data associated with security events, index and access it in less than a second, and then be able to apply turnkey remediation and responses in real time so that you're actually not just being reactive and being able to detect any of these intrusions, you're also being able to remediate, protect very quickly, and then put controls in place so that the next time something like that happens, you're already prepared and so forth. So Chronicle Security Operations is, in our opinion, a modern, integrated version that people have done in the last decade or so of multiple siloed technologies, but done in a step function way. So we're not like, here's our original Nokia phone, we added email to it and it became BlackBerry. We had to rethink it with like the construct that iOS or Android has done with an operating system powering mobile. We had to rethink the architecture of security operations from the ground up and then build it so that this is how you can actually get ahead of nation states rather than the last decade. I mean, I think it turns out that it requires not just Google, but it requires a community, partners, customers, open source developers all participating in it. So a lot of our investment is about, therefore, not just protecting Google and protecting our customers, but also empowering our developers and partners and customers developers to all participate in the same operating system construct, right? So, and that's really what Chronicle is think about it as a security operating system that everybody could build apps on that actually meet their requirements, but it's actually served with the power of backing of Google.
And on the Chronicle Security Operations website, you talk of staying clear of blind spots.
Yeah.
What do you mean by this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I mentioned a bit, it turns out that in the traditional technologies that were used to solve this problem, because of architectural and technology limitations, you would not capture data from all your sensors. You would only capture it from certain things, such as network firewalls or endpoints and so forth, but not from all your assets because it's just too much data. And then second, you wouldn't store it for a long period of time, again, because it's too much data, it's too expensive. And in those two things, you're essentially creating blind spots by not being able to detect and not being able to access data from a while ago, right? And so that was fundamental to Chronicle, was we had to remove that as a constraint to really unlock the next generation of security. And that's fundamental to why Chronicle is differentiated than anything else in the market.
Now, Cristina, your clients vary from across industry, from telecommunications to banking to even tourism. How does this vary across the different sectors?
Well, I don't think that there's many variation between the sectors. I think there's variations between the likelihood of something happening or the response, or actually the impact that something can happen between the different sectors. And if you look, for example, as financial services, you can see that there's an increase in fraud. There's an increase of credential taken over, and that has an impact and has on the people that use that financial services, but also has some type of financial attainment for the attackers. If you move to the healthcare sector, usually what we see a lot is ransomware attacks. And what happened here is that can create absolutely havoc in a hospital, for example, when they take private data from the people that are in the hospital at the moment. If you look at the public state, as Sunil was mentioning before, we're talking about nation-state attackers. And in this case, they usually go through certain infrastructure that can be key for the country at the moment. And you can imagine what the impact of that can have. So in Europe, we are now seeing a rise in social engineering. And what happened with this is that Google is actually extremely prepared to deal with this. And we have a response through cloud infrastructure in which it has built-in security features that we see our customers coming to us asking for it. And from the part of the security products, we also have detection and response that can help with this type of attacks. And now with the acquisition of Mandiant, it makes Google even more important for actually our customers to deal with this type of attacks that we're seeing that are rising so much in the latest years.
It's so interesting, all these different sectors that I think most people wouldn't even think that they'd come under attack, like a hospital. I mean, it just goes to show that any industry that kind of has any technological infrastructure needs security.
Yeah, even the small companies.
Yeah.
In some ways, Alex, cyber has become as mainstream as digital modernization for every enterprise. There was the wave of the internet 20 years ago, and you would have thought, okay, which of these companies would use the internet versus traditional, right? 20 years ago, right? And then 10 years ago, it was the mobile wave. As in, okay, are we just using it for just simple cell phones, or are we actually transacting business over mobile phones? For pretty much every business, right? And in the last 10 years, you could argue that cloud is the new third wave of it. But cyber has almost forked off from being a feature in the internet. Even 20 years ago, there was a lot of cybersecurity and things like that. 10 years ago, mobile had security, cloud had security, but cyber has now become big enough to become its own big wave that's become mainstream, so that even a small retail chain has to think about cyber like the way they think about internet connectivity. Right? So in that sense, it's become quite mainstream.
Yeah. So going on from what you said then, talking about the past and how it's kind of evolved, now looking into your crystal ball, how do you see cybersecurity threats developing in the next 10 years?
Yeah, I think in terms of like like we talked about, like we're in probably the early stages of this nation state pivot. And I think what we're going to see in the next few years is just like a mass mainstream of that sort of threat actors spinning up recurring activities to go down what I call the enterprise pyramid, which is instead of just hitting the big banks, they're going to go to the small hospitals, to the small retail chains who are not as equipped, right?
Yeah.
And so ultimately for us, that's one reason why we think about cyber not just as an awareness to be as important as digitization for every company, but in terms of preparation, you can't take piecemeal approaches because you can't expect a small retail chain to buy 10 different security products to protect themselves, right? Mm-hmm. So the only way we think about a secular approach to solving this over the next decade would be to truly imagine each of these companies. Imagine they were actually applications on an operating system that was very modern but had security built in, so that everything that protected a company like Google could be used to protect a small company or a very large bank. And so that's our sort of like our main thrust in helping our customers, working with our partners, is to actually enable our customers to not to take a piecemeal approach, but to adopt a step function change by becoming an app on our cloud operating system. And in doing so, everything that protected Google can now be used to protect themselves.
I guess one thing that potentially companies, especially the smaller companies, maybe puts them off from taking a cybersecurity protective position is maybe the cost and the availability of it. But from the sounds of things, this makes it more accessible to every business.
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the ways is that in some ways, if you take the analogy of online commerce versus physical commerce, with mobile, it enabled the democratization of commerce to be in your fingertips, right? I mean, right now you just, half your, food orders are online, right? I think similarly, by being built on cloud, it allowed cyber to be delivered in an easy to consume, bite-sized approach that will help even a small company to a very large company. So that was the inflection point between cloud intersecting with cyber to really offer that, multiple.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Sunil and Cristina, for coming in today and talking with me about this very important information.
Oh, thank you, Alex. Great to be here.
Thank you, Alex. It's been a pleasure.